Here.
Representative Burkhardt,
Here.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Here.
Representative Aaron,
Here.
Representative Gray,
Here.
Representative Heiner,
Here.
Representative Sherwood,
Here.
Representative Western, Chairman Greer.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you.
And you are live.
All right, we're live now. Good. Well, good morning. Welcome to Minerals Committee. Today, we've got 4 bills on the agenda, probably an aggressive agenda, but we'll start with first House Bill 67, then we'll move to Wyoming Preference Act, 1971 amendments. I think it's House Bill 102. And then I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get to Wyoming Business Council promotion of low taxes, House Bill 110. And then if we get to your bill, Representative Henderson, that's great, but we'll get it first up on Friday if we don't. Yeah, so, you know, you're more than welcome to sit there and mumble and watch us all you want. You're a good friend. All right. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and start then with House Bill 67, I assume Chairman Harshman.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate you scheduling the bill for a hearing and appreciate your consideration. Members, really, like most bills we bring to the legislature, a lot of them are folks that we represent, bring us ideas, right? And this is really an idea that's been percolating literally and talked about and a couple of different folks that I know. And so really, so you have challenging budget times. There's a couple ways to study things. You can do a legislative task force. It's going to cost about 35, 40,000, right? To pull legislators in and groups. So this is what I call a task force on a budget. And so really it's executive branch folks come together, not legislative involvement really, but reporting to us in the legislature, and really starts really with Article 1, Section 31 of our Constitution, control of water. And I'll just read this, Mr. Chairman. Water being essential to industrial prosperity of limited amount and easy of diversion from its natural channels, its control must be in the state, which in providing for its use shall equally guard all the various interests involved. And then you go, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go to doing this digitally, so bear with, but Article 8, Section 1 of our Constitution, water is state property. The water of all natural streams, springs, lakes, or other collections of still water within the boundaries of the state are hereby declared to be the property of the state. And so here we are, we're obviously, you know, the Clean Air Act changed Wyoming for good at the expense of Appalachia. Our coal became the coal of choice, and now further policies are maybe changing some of that. And just 5-6 years ago, we mined 450 million tons. We're going to be just a shade over 200. It's about $400+ million a year. That's really our budget issue. I mean, we can talk a lot of stuff, but it's the demise of coal. That's for another time and another subject. And I can tell you, and we all kind of are probably like-minded on that. So as we start to embrace this, all the above strategy, I think this whole geothermal part came into play. Wyoming has tremendous resources. And I think when I first talked about geothermal, people that go, you're not talking Thermopolis or Yellowstone, are you? I go, no, I'm talking my whole hometown, Midwest Wyoming, where the water comes out 200 degrees, right? An old oil field. And that's all over Wyoming. We have tremendous resources. And so I think that's one of those. And then this whole, with the backing of the vice chair and the chairman, amended your committee bill on the Energy Authority, clearing up those definitions. And you were gracious enough, you supported that amendment on pumped hydro in the bill and geothermal and pumped hydro. So really, I come here today with this geothermal energy review, but I emailed you another cleaned up version of that amendment to really broaden it again today. So when this bill hits the floor, to get really smart people together and talk about this. I think back 10 years ago, the Nuclear Energy Production Task Force. I ran that bill, it was vetoed by a governor. The next governor signed it into law. You know, we regulate our own uranium mining in the state because of that bill. It took about 6 years, and then this committee finally pushed that past. But we have all those laws in place for the production of nuclear energy now in our state. And so we're ready if modular nukes come or those kind of things. But one of these steps, though, I do believe, Mr. Chairman, is this pumped hydro storage. You've been in my office in my former job where we heard folks talk about that. That's a plan in Wyoming. That's part of the plan is this. Wyoming has a couple key places where hydro storage is going to be an important part and important mix as we move forward. And I think now developments in Washington, D.C., and we hear about hydrogen. And Wyoming is poised in a perfect position with our natural gas, our renewables, and our water resources, I think. And so that's really what I'm trying to amend into this bill is some more talk about hydrogen, open it up. So we then add one more task force member, get some smart people in Wyoming together and start thinking big about this and charting a plan forward. So that's really, we all know kind of what needs to be done, but we need to kind of, we're going in this direction. And so I think getting folks together, it all begins with conversations. And so, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to take you through the bill or through the amendment, really, it sets up a task force. You can see members on page 2. It talks who's going to be in the task force. And then it talks about some of the things they can study. Doesn't limit it totally to that on page 4. And then the appropriation in section 2 on page 5. And Mr. Chairman, the amendment then simply substitutes everywhere it says geothermal, it adds hydro and hydrogen energy in there. And so the hydro is very broad, and I working with the drafter at LSO on this. And so we just settled on, instead of saying pumped hydro, we just say hydro and hydrogen related. And so that's throughout the bill, and that's most of that amendment. And it adds one more person kind of on that task force. And so I can go through it line by line if you'd like, but it's a pretty simple bill, and you've got 3 more after.
Yeah, I
So-
think, Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and maybe probably members on this committee know the answer, but so with respect to hydrogen, who owns that mineral asset? Is that a defined asset?
You know, it's a good question, Mr. Chairman, but certainly part of that's water, part of natural gas, part of the byproduct is going to be water. I think this group could talk about that.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll help the good chairman of revenue with that, hopefully helping. I think it would depend on where the water comes from that's used to generate the hydrogen. I think if it's state waters, then it belongs to the state. If it's private waters, I think it would belong to the private, but it's an interesting question that I think probably needs to be resolved. There's a national request for proposal out to actually discuss those kind of issues currently. And I think Wyoming is geared to participate in that separate from this bill. Thank you.
Okay. I think we read the bill. I mean, it's just setting up a task force, and the amendment is pretty clear on its face. So I don't know. Committee got any higher level questions? Go ahead, Representative Reiner, then Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm vastly in support of this bill. I think there's a great horizon just over the hill for the state of Wyoming through these resources. But Representative Harshman, what do you think the end game is? What's your vision after we get this report? Because the state geologist has studied some of these features in Wyoming in the past, and there's been nothing come from that. What can we do to further that process once we get this report? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a good question. I think we haven't had to take the next step. We've been riding the coal train. And so I think we're in different times. I think there's different federal incentives that are moving through Washington. And I think, it's changing. We're closer to 2050 than we are 1950. And I think we got to change, and I think it's similar to Governor Hathaway. Flew all around the place, took the coal business to Wyoming instead of Montana. And I think we got to get out front of this. And that's really, all of it begins with talk, right? And smart people planning. And so that's really what I'm trying to do. But so the next steps, I don't know for sure, but I think hopefully we get some of these ideas. I think bonding and a public resource like water, public-private partnerships. I think we got to get out on a mission to find new coal mines for our state, frankly. And I think this is one of them. I think it could be a potential. So I appreciate your support and sponsorship, but I don't have that answer, but I think this is at least taking that first step.
So I think I'll just comment real quickly, having come in on the tail end of the uranium task force. I was on minerals after these recommendations had come out, and then we systematically went through and made statutory changes basically on the minerals committee, and then set up to be an agreement state, which was scheduled to be a 6-year process. I actually got done in 4 years, and believe it or not, $1.2 million under budget, which never happens in the government, but it did. But I think those are some of those things that came out of that, is that discussion is where do we need to look to next, and what do we need to next steps. Go ahead, Representative Gray, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Harshman, I guess my question is, I've been to a couple of these more executive branch task forces, and what I've observed on a couple of them that I've been to, and they were a little bit different. They're a little more conducive to that is that the thinking oftentimes is that government is the answer on a lot of these things. I'm trying to phrase it in a way that is good. And so, I think sometimes having the legislature there, I can see why you wouldn't do it on a bill like this, because maybe there's not enough expertise, but I think oftentimes it is too centered on, well, we can create a task force within X agency and that's the answer. And then suddenly we get a piece of legislation with a huge fiscal note, and it just becomes difficult for us. And that's supposed to be the answer, and it's really not. And so anyway, I'm, as you know, like you, really into our resources and getting those reaching their full potential. But I don't know. I'm just a little, you have any responses on that thinking? I know we have the liaisons, and maybe that'll bring that other perspective on budget woes and what we can and can't do. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, do you have a comment or
Mr. Chairman.
any specific reason why you didn't add legislators to the list?
Trying to save a few bucks, frankly. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, okay.
If you want to add them.
Penny foolish pound, or how's that go?
Well,
You know what I mean.
anyway, I found foolish, but
Yeah, like that, yeah.
Yeah, I know as citizen legislature folks are very busy, but I just was really trying to do task force in the least expensive way to get smart people together. But I don't have a problem at all having legislators on this at all. If someone wants to make that amendment, I think.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Harshman, and more specifically to your bill, on page 2, Romanet 3, line 10. Representative of the School of Energy Resources appointed by the president of the university. How would you feel, and I'll just ask you, changing that to appointed by the ERC? I feel that might be a better way to go, rather than just have the president appoint them, have the ERC appoint. Just a question.
Mr. Chairman,
There you go.
I agree. I think that'd be a great amendment. Make a good bill better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, any more questions for our ex-speaker? Chairman Harshman, Coach Harshman, Citizen Harshman? All right. Anybody else wishes to speak on this bill? There, we've got people out there. Okay. Anybody that's going to speak on it, raise your hand, and I've also got to work in people that are on screen. So, okay, let's go ahead with Representative Sweeney, give her legislator's preference. And so you got Robin Cooley coming in. Okay. We'll hear from her next. Go ahead, Representative Sweeney.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I really urge the committee to move this forward. I know we don't, in this season of change and like the word task force, but I really believe this, if we're going to get to an economic development point of all of the above on producing energy as an export product, I think this is a tremendous way to move us forward. I've agreed with the comments on making a good bill better, as put by the good chairman of revenue. But I really would urge the committee to move this forward and get some amendments. And, there's possibly other things that could be studied on top of the geothermal, but that we could add also. But I think it is the role of our state government to help lead the way. And my vision is these will become public-private partnerships in the future, and just like coal has happened. So sometimes we've got to lead the way on those things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions for Representative Sweeney? Okay, anybody else? Is it Director Cooley? Is she wish to testify on this? Or is it seem? There she is. Yeah, Director Cooley, we're on House Bill 67, geothermal energy review.
Thank you, Chairman Greer. I'm actually here to speak to offer any opportunity for questions for the next bill. So I'm not sure if it's operator error here or what. I can't lower my hand here, so I apologize.
Okay, I thought as much. So very good. Okay. All right. Anyone else wishes to testify or comment on House Bill 67? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close testimony. What's the committee's pleasure? Moved by Heiner, seconded by Air. Okay. Do we want to dispense with? We do have the handout that basically the amendment for the hydro and hydrogen. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want a clarification. And maybe the bringer of the bill is the latest email I received. That's really loud. The latest email I received, is that the same one as the printout, or is the latest email I received the better of the amendment?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I sent you an email, the committee at 7:47. It's just a little bit cleaned up version. It's almost identical, but it's cleaned up version from Mr. Gruber. I sent you one last night and then cleaned it up this morning.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the one that we have is printed is from last night. Yeah.
It's real similar, but I just sent you this morning a little bit, few cleanups on it. It's in your email.
I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Yeah,
So
Representative Air.
Well, yeah, we've got 2 copies, so could we just have one example of which one is the correct one?
the emailed one is the correct one from this morning.
Mr. Chairman, they are the same amendment, just a couple words cleaned up from this morning. Same amendment, but
I can email it.
cleaned up version.
I'll email it.
What time was that?
7:47, House Minerals Business.
Lost track of which one was which now.
And I can't log on to the House printer. My plan was to print you a fresh copy, but can't print.
7:47 a.m.
7:47 this morning. Yeah.
Why don't we, Representative Duncan, if you see what changes are there, look for that. Why don't we go ahead and we'll punch through the bill, see if we can bring that amendment in. I'm just cutting it just a little bit close for the committee to be able to have that and work it. So we may just have to leave that to the committee of the whole amendment. Mr. Chairman. So if we can't get it, be comfortable with it. Okay, so committee, the bill's been moved and seconded. Any general comments? I think we've all commented. Anything on page 1? Page 2, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would propose an amendment on page 2, line 12, under Romanet 3. And to change who appoints the School of Energy Resources person. If I could get a second, I'll explain it.
Yeah, it's been seconded.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would just make one change to strike president of the university and insert Energy Resource Council. I feel that's more appropriate.
Yeah, I agree. Any discussion on the amendment? Do we understand the amendment? Question on the amendment. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, opposed? All right, amendment passes. Anything further on page 2? Page 3? Yeah, Representative Hyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would refer to lines 14 through 20 on page 3. It says up to 2 representatives and 1 Senate member of the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Interim Committee may be appointed by the chairman of the committee to act as a legislative liaison to the task force. So it's not clear to me the chairman of the new task force or the committee, who that chairman would be.
So Representative Heiner, I did the same thing, and then there's another place where I did that as well. I'm taking the committee to mean our committee.
That's what I'm taking as well. So I
Yeah,
was
and
wondering
the
if we
task
ought to,
force is the task force.
I wonder if we ought to amend that to stipulate the minerals committee, or just, is it obvious to everyone? who
Well,
that-
we could be extremely popular and just say that the House chairman of the Minerals Committee.
I'm good with that.
No, we don't need to do that. I think it's fine as that is. Senator Anderson and I get together, find out which one of you guys are passionate about it, point you to it.
We're good.
You're good?
We're good.
Okay. All right. Anything on page 4? Okay, page 5. Page 6. Okay, Representative Duncan, you've had a chance to review the 747 version of the amendment versus the one I'm holding. You want to move that, walk us through it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the proposed amendment. It is throughout the entire bill. The Harshman Amendment.
Okay. And from what we have in hand to what was online, what differences?
None.
are there? None.
There's-
None.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, the only change is on your copy on page 1, line 16, where it says hydropower in the western region of the United States. And then the cleaned up version adds requested by the governor to serve.
Okay, that's not the version I got, so.
So that's the one that was emailed to you this morning.
Would you say that again for us?
Requested by the governor to serve. That's the only change as I scan through it.
Okay. All right, so that amendment's been moved by Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Burkhart. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, question being called. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Oh, Sherwood. Okay, good. All right, that amendment passes. Anything further on the bill, committee? Okay, question being called. Roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Representative Bear, thank you. Representative Burkhart.
Aye.
Vice Chair Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Air.
Aye.
Representative Gray.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Western. Chairman Greer.
Aye.
9 ayes do pass with amendment.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, Chairman Harshman, I'll have to re-refer that. I mean, it's a small appropriation, but I'll have to re-refer it. Thank you. All right, very good. Okay, next up on our list is a House Bill 102 Wyoming Preference Act amendments. I think Speaker Barlow.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring to you House Bill 102 today and give you a brief explanation. The experts on the issue and the topic, just like the good speaker before me, former speaker before me, this is a constituent bill. And some of those folks are here today to provide testimony and examples of why this is important to their businesses and to Wyoming. So briefly, I'll just give you the summary of the bill, Mr. Chairman, with your permission is, and I should say where this came from. So in our community, we have a local organization, Chamber of Commerce. It has different groups within it. One of the groups is a business advisory committee. And it's made up of all kinds of contractors and all kinds of folks who are employ and do business in our state, in our community, and some of them across state lines, including the coal mines, including the surveyors, including construction folks. So they're always looking for ways, what can you do? What can we take to the legislature that actually helps us do business? Helps us do business better and more efficiently. So this is one of those ideas that's been percolating for a couple of years. A former member of the legislature that is also was also a former chairman of this committee on the Senate side, as a part of that group and has been so for 6-8 years. I started participating in the last couple of years and certainly learned a lot of things about what the challenges businesses have with some of what we do down here. So that's where this comes from. There's basically 4 concepts within this bill. One is the proof of residency. And that is currently taken care of in Chapter 12 rules, and we're kind of bringing that into the statutes itself. So you'll see in the bill, it's on basically page 2 of the bill and onto page 3. And there's a couple additions, the military edition, et cetera. And you will note, and it'll be brought up, that we are striking the 1-year thing. And I'll tell you, I'm hesitant to even talk about residency and identification at this point in our legislative thing. So if somebody wants to have that discussion, I'm certainly willing to have the discussion. But so there's one component. The second component is that is important, and this is quite honestly the most important part for the contractors or my constituents from my community, and I think throughout the state, is bottom of page 4. This talks about certainly we want to prioritize Wyoming workers. No question about that. If there are Wyoming workers, and this only applies to public works jobs. So whether it's a state contract, community contract, county, special district, this applies to those contracts. And that they have basically, you have to have a resident doing that work unless there are no residents available. Either our unemployment rate is really low, and at times, as you know, it can be very tight. In some communities, it can be really tight. Or there's a skill set that is maybe not well represented, or there aren't any people with certain skills in the state of Wyoming. So you have to rely on people from out of state. That's just reality. So it's those 2 things. So as it currently stands, this goes to line 4, is generally by the job, by the contract that you would say, I need somebody for this contract. I'm short, I don't have enough people, or I don't have the skill set that might be available. And when we talk about labor in this bill, I want to be clear, that's skilled and unskilled folks. That's professionals and folks that may do the heavy lifting stuff. It's not a derogatory term. It's folks doing work. It's employees. And that's probably something we should maybe think about at another time. But so the second concept in here, and this is probably the most important one, is instead of certifying per job, I mean per contract, you first certify the person that's available, and they can work on multiple contracts. So if you're in a community, you have 2 different contracts, you'd have to do 2 different certifications for each one. Instead of certifying the person so they could bounce back and forth between the 2 projects, you get the best value out of that individual who you need for both projects. So it's kind of taking some of the red tape, at least how I view it. It's taking some of the repetitive red tape out of something that these folks are already dealing with. The 9-month, of course, goes to, if you're not a resident, and construction season, right? Construction season is generally fair weather, and 9 months, if you're here 9 months, you're more than 9 months, or certainly after a year, then you're probably just a resident. So that's one of the things that I think you'll see in there. The other one that it's also built into this one is, and this is the second half of that of page 4, kind of 16 through 21 is, or 16 through 19, if you will, is an emergency situation. So that's kind of ingrained throughout this. And I'll let the folks that, come forward and talk about this different instances, but several years ago, we had flooding in one part of the state, a lot of flooding. And they were trying to get infrastructure put back in, bridges and things like that. Well, there's a delay period because this requires a certification. So you need to know a certain amount of time, and you have to go through the process with the Department of Workforce Services, who does a stellar job and turns things around, I think, quite appropriately. But sometimes you need people on the ground working. You need to fix things as soon as you can. So if you can certify, or the government entity certifies this is an emergency, we need to turn this over fast. Who's the most appropriate and who's available to get something accomplished? This would be one of those cases. I don't think this is going to be used widely, but it's just a tool we thought we'd put in the toolbox for these. Now, these are public works, remember. These are infrastructure and things like that. Maybe water, maybe a water system goes down. The third thing that's in this is how the workforce services interacts with the companies, these employers, to best understand that they are complying. And right now, and this, I'll go to, sorry, I'm going to have to get to the right page here. The certifications, and this will be on, I should have bookmarked it. There's some federal requirement. Okay, it's page 6. So there's a lot of things that you fill in, a lot of gaps for those first 3. And then the last one is how you basically certify, get or provide information, and then the enforcement that the agency would go through workforce services to ensure this. So currently on the bottom of page 6, you see some federally certified reporting requirements. Well, the main contractors know how to deal with that. They do big jobs. They understand that. But some of the subcontractors, that's not in their wheelhouse. They're doing the work on the ground. So what the kind of the midpoint was, okay, let's just use the payroll report as the way to certify that you're actually following through what you said you would. So it's already that's been a longstanding practice, not the payroll report, but longstanding practice as a enforcement mechanism. And so this was just using the payroll report instead of those federally required stuff, because many of the subcontractors just don't work in that world. They're just not at that level of, I won't call it sophistication, but just knowledge and experience. So we're trying to clean that up and clear that up, hopefully. And this is a way that uses what they already have on hand to accomplish what the division may need if they think there's a challenge. Now, I think the last thing I want to point out is take a look at the page 7. There is no incentive for any employer to not comply with this, because if you go down to 1, line 6 through 13, and then B, a first offense and a second offense, there's pretty stiff. And when you get to a second offense, you don't get a public contract for a year. So there is nothing about this where people are trying to skirt anything, because we're leaving the penalties the same. The penalty is you may not be eligible if you violate these preference things. You may not be eligible for a public contract for a year. So I can assure you, at least the folks in my community, the contractors, which you'll hear from, they take this very seriously, and they do their due diligence to make sure what they do is accurate and reflective of the law. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions for Speaker Barlow? I'll go with Burkhart and then Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I'm on page 6. Well, wait a minute. I think I just moved over a page. I'm sorry. I'm on page 4, line 11. Let you get there. So it says near state workforce center. Some of these projects may occur where there would be multiple workforce centers. And I'm just curious if it should be just singular or plural. I can understand if you have a project in the northeast corner of the state, you wouldn't want to post it in the southwest corner. But there may be multiple workforce centers. I know it's existing language where you would want to post these jobs, especially if you knew there may be a available workforce, say in the center of the state, who are looking for work. And some of the work is very specific, very unique on some of the projects we do. So I guess I'm just asking if eventually just change workforce center to centers plural, how you would feel about that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess it's my understanding, and I'm a 8-year member of Labor, Health and Social Service, so you think I'd have a better understanding, but that the workforce centers is a network. So you put it on one center and it is in the network, and that job posting or that inquiry is available to the entire network. Certainly the Director Cooley's here, Mr. Chairman, and Jason Wolf, if he's available. I don't know, can't see the screen that you can see. But I think they would answer that question probably mostly. But I certainly wouldn't, the adding of an S doesn't bother me, but I think it's taken care of by the way the system is built, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the explanation. That's fine. I was just curious. Thank you. There will be no amendment.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, just as a point of clarification, the way I'm reading the bill, the person that can be certified for multiple projects is the contractor, right? We're not talking about certifying a laborer for different projects. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, that's interesting. That's interesting because actually the labor is the one that's being, in this proposal, it's a labor. The person is actually the individual who is making the contract with the public entity. So it is a little bit, it is a little challenging. So in this one, the person is the contractor and subsequent subcontractors. The labor is the one that this actually is applying to, that they actually need someone to do a particular task or don't have enough people. They go out, they can't find them. So then the labor is the one that they're actually asking certification on. So the person is asking certification on the laborer. I think that's the most simple, that's how I understand it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up, Representative Bear.
Yeah, follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, so this payroll report that you mentioned would have the names and identification information, and then that would be attached to the certification. Is that a correct understanding?
Mr. Chairman, so I think the payroll thing is more of an audit type function. It is certainly the application and what they do will have those initial things, but there's no payroll in the application, obviously. It's just, we need someone. This is the person we'd like to bring in. Don't have anybody else available. We've gone through the requisite time frame and search process, and no one's available. So this is who we're going to do. Certain as the audit becomes part of that, as later on to verify, et cetera, then that's when payroll will be a part of that. Said, this is what you applied for. Is that the person that you ended up employing? Is that consistent with what your representation was with your application?
Let me go Representative Duncan, then Air.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, so a couple questions here. Following up on Representative Bear. So as far as the payroll part, we would be looking at these individuals as more of an independent contractor, kind of a thought process in terms of auditing them. Even though they're employed by the main person, they're actually working individual, not as a payroll, because they're kind of a subcontractor of the contractor. And that's my first question. And then the second question is, on the emergency part, would it be safe to assume when we get all these hailstorms, or when, like the example in Texas with everything that's happened there, would we be able to pull in massive people that we are shorthanded in plumbers, or we're shorthanded in different kind of things, that's what this part would cover us on? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll take the second one first, just because it's fresher, I guess. Certainly the examples that were provided are potential examples, flood, fire, whatever. But recall, this is public works. This is a job that a city, county, town, water district fire district may need, if there's some catastrophic, I guess, we can come up with examples, and I think, I know our contractor representatives will have some specific examples where the floods from several years ago, I know, are one of those. But I think all those examples are correct. The independent contractor, I think we're starting to mix things together a little bit. What with the general, and like I said, the experts are in the room. And the general, my understanding is you have a general contractor who bids a job, Public Works. They may have subcontractors underneath them. The contract has the requirement for resident laborers. It's a statutory requirement that is part of the contract. And it's in the rules as well, Chapter 12 rules from the department. So that's a stated, everybody knows it up front. It's a requirement. And you also know the penalties if you don't do it. You don't get another contract for a year if you violate that, the second violation. So everybody knows it up front. So the contractor says, okay, we're going to hire everybody we hire, and then subcontractor says, we're responsible for that too. We're responsible. But the folks that they hire, they're employees of those, whatever level it is. There's no independent contractor. In fact, I think this explicitly does not apply to an independent contractor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I have a question on where you referred to the 9-month period. And I just wondered, I realize our construction season in Wyoming is pretty limited. And so that probably makes some sense, but I can envision a larger project in a building where you could be closed in and work year round. Would it be better to expand that a little bit, or comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's a great point. We had a lot of discussion about that. There's kind of a middle point. So we have two kinds of construction, in this world, there's two: folks that are vertical and folks that are horizontal, right? And mostly what we probably are, there's a lot more horizontal infrastructure construction in the state of Wyoming than there is maybe stuff going up. And so that's kind of where this grew out of. And the folks that come forward, they're infrastructure folks. They're putting in bridges. They're on, every bridge all summer, that we go over, and, building roads and redoing roads and things like that. So that's kind of what it was more geared toward. And by the time you get to 12 months, are they just residents? And quite honestly, the 9 months, I kind of fell on that. It was a group effort. I kind of like that number, because if they're going to work in the state for 9 months and they stay for another 3, then we can have them as residents, and we can have their families here, and we can, they're contributing and they're part of our communities. So I kind of went the other way. I think it's almost a semi-recruitment tool. So we can have more of those folks here and skilled folks here, potentially. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I just real quick comment, Mr. Speaker. I just, and I don't have a proposal on this, but I just thought it would be that you could roll that another 3 months with the simple ask if your project was going longer. It was all, but your logic makes sense to me too. Representative Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Speaker, for being here. This bill is great for the state of Wyoming to help the citizens, but I want to refer to the residency clauses on page 2. We're striking out the 1 year clause that they preceding the time of the labor or the construction project, and making it a lot easier to claim residency. I worry about with letting the pendulum go too far to the other side. An example may be when there's a big construction project coming up. The way I read this right now, out-of-state individuals could pull their trailer into the state, park it at a camp spot or an RV park, go to the Wyoming Workforce Services and get sign a form that they are now living in the state in this RV spot, or go to the Department of the Highway Department and get an identification card, and now they fulfill all the requirements to be classified as a resident. Is that, am I reading that wrong, or could that feasibly happen?
Mr. Chairman, so thank you. So the residence requirement is something, I don't know that Workforce Services is involved in that initial residency a determination. That's something that the individual or the potential employee would be representing to the employer, to the contractor, whoever they are. So I don't know about the initial for that. Now, if there's an audit, then, and the Department of Workforce Service under current rules, and I can pull up chapter 12 right now, because it is, chapter 12 is based on the current rules. There is a 12-year residency, et cetera, or excuse me, 12-month residency. Certainly I'm amenable, and I think, you know, if that is a hang up, that we just bring that 1 year and put it down into A, because I'm going to say that respectfully, Mr. Chairman, because if you look at the next three, the first was the DD 214, right? You've been out of state. You cannot have lived in this state. You're representing you're from this state. The school ID, let's see, pull up the right one here. Wyoming school, I mean, you can make a case if you're paying resident tuition. I mean, this is where we get into House Bill 75, and we get into all these places. But if there's a discomfort with the 1 year thing, I respectfully would say, you know, bring it in and bring it in at the appropriate place. And I'll certainly work with the committee. If you're not ready, don't know where you want it today, I'll certainly be willing to work with you on a committee of the whole amendment to bring that in if there's reservations about it. And then of course the others are, just we're on the same page. The DD 214 Wyoming school is not in the rules currently. The driver's license is, the residency statement is, the minor dependent is not. So there's actually 2 additions to this that are not in current rules. Now the department has E, which is the catch-all, other documentary evidence. So that maybe encompasses everything. So I'm certainly willing. I appreciate the comment. I know there's reservation about that. And I'm respectful that if the committee wants to do something with that here, or if it gets out of here on the floor, I'll be glad to participate. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Anything further? Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Speaker, just a point of clarification. On page 5, line kind of line 1 through 4, the State Workforce Center certifies that the person's need for laborers cannot be filled from those Wyoming laborers listed with the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services. Just to make sure I understand that correctly. So they go to the DWS, they provide them a list of people that have come to them saying, hey, I'm seeking employment. Here are my skills, qualifications, etc. That contractor has to go to DWS, look through that list and try to hire the ones that fit the qualifications. Outside of that list, though, they won't get penalized if there just happens to be people in that community that may or may not be qualified, and that the contractor can't be penalized if they're not on a DWS list. Do I understand that correctly?
Mr. Speaker.
Madam Vice Chairman, so that is my understanding. They can't be penalized for something they have no knowledge of, and the Workforce Services, can't obligate them to do something that they are a resource or a person, excuse me, that they don't have any knowledge of. So that's my understanding. Obviously, Workforce Services is available for questions and any clarifications, but that is how I understand it. What's available is what they vet their employment roster against or need against, and what's not available after a period of time, then they get the certification. Thank you. And it's not an overnight thing. It takes, I think it's 11 days or 10 days or something like that you have to do the search. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Speaker, appreciate your work, and I am a little, though, I think I'm like everyone. I mean, I have constituents that take advantage of this, and so whenever there's amendments on this, I mean, I do get a little nervous. So I just want to understand on page 4 to 5. I mean, outside of the residency issue, which, like you said, I mean, we can amend that, but and the documentation is already in rule. But I'm trying to understand on the heart of the bill, or what you're saying is the heart of the bill, pages 4 to 5, what we're trying to solve. And I know maybe I missed it, but is it the 11 days that's the holdup, or is it the other issue where you can combine public works, 2 different projects at one time and get have one person on two different projects. It appeared that that was what you were saying the problem more was, and I'm not seeing where the original language really precludes that. I mean, but is it just assume that it doesn't allow that, and that's why we're putting in this 9-month blanket? But I'm just trying to understand the language in pages 4 to 5, which I think is kind of the heart of the bill, right?
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So point 2 of Representative Gray's is the accurate, most important component of this bill, is that instead of certifying every single contract the employee needed for every single contract and not being able to use a individual on 2 different contracts, you certify the individual and they can work on any of the contracts for which there isn't a resident laborer available. So it's a means to basically allow transferability between public works contracts of a laborer and not segment a laborer to each contract. And if I'm not explaining that well enough, the folks that actually do this on a day-to-day basis will come forward and clarify that. But that is my understanding, both in visiting with the department and with the folks on the ground that actually live this. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe a follow-up in the future testimony. What in the language prevents that currently? Is it the 11 days and that you'd have to concurrently advertise those things? I mean, what I'm trying to understand is, can we work in the 11 days and still have that adequate notice and solve the problem that you're saying is there? But is the 11 days the problem? And so that's what I'm trying to understand, because thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Madam Chairman, I don't think the 11 days in and of itself is the problem. It's the individual contracts and the segmentation of a labor per contract or a need per contract that is the issue. The 11 days and I think what we've done now is gone from 11 days prior to the job to just application, and they have to respond within 10 days. I mean, there's a 1 day, in my estimation, a 1 day difference. That's contained, and it's actually in 2 different sections, at least the way I interpret it. And like I said, the department is here. They'll tell you, oh, we'd like a little more time, but to make sure that it's clear. But I think the contractors say, but we want to get working. We want to get to work. We want to have people employed. So I think it's a balance. We're trying to find a balance here for public works. By the way, the more we delay public works, how do you think that works out? If they're delayed, it's a cost to the taxpayers. We can't get the folks doing the jobs. And I'm not saying it's, huge money, but things don't get done maybe when the citizens and hopefully the governing bodies would hope they would. That's part of it, I believe, from my perspective. And hopefully, Madam Vice Chairman, Representative Gray can ask some of those other folks, and they'll testify specifically to his inquiry. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Do we
I'll
have-
remain available, and there's good folks coming forward.
Perfect. Thank you. Do we have any other legislators that would like to testify on this particular bill? No? Okay, so I think we're going to go straight to, she's not on the screen anymore. I want to go to agencies. Do we have, can we allow her into the room? Director Cooley?
Yes, here she comes.
Thank you. Do we have any other agencies in the room? Raise your hand. No? Okay. As soon as you're ready, Director Cooley, go ahead.
Apologize, it took me just a few minutes there. Good morning, Madam Chairperson, members of the committee. My name is Robin Cooley, and I am the Director of Workforce Services. I'm here with the real experts in the office, and I'll introduce you to them in just a few minutes. I did want to, if I may, respond to Representative Burkhart's question about the workforce centers around the state and how that might work internally with those different workforce centers if you didn't go to the one that was the closest. My understanding on that particular issue is we've got 20 workforce centers around the state, you make an application or you bring the information into one, that's going to go, that information, especially with the job openings, is going to go up on a site we have in every workforce center. It's called Wyoming at Work. So if you're looking for employers, that's where that's going to go up, and that will shoot around to the entire state. So I hope that addresses that question. And I have to tell you, I think, you know, we've got 20. So if you pick one over the other, and maybe there's a few miles difference, I don't know that that's going to matter that much to us. The issue is getting into one of those workforce centers and getting that information to them so we can get that information up on the Wyoming at Work website. So with that, what I want to do, though, is get you to the real experts in our office. And I want to introduce you to first our agency administrator, Jason Wolf. He's our workforce standards administrator over this section, but also we've got Trevor Mansfield that's in the chat box as well. He's our preference coverage analyst manager, and this is really his day-to-day work, and he is a true expert. So with that, I'll turn them over to you, and Jason, take it away if you would, please.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jason Wolf, Administrator for Workforce Standards at Department of Workforce Services. I think, yes, thank you to Speaker Barlow, did a great job introducing that and giving, you know, the general overview of the bill. And again, I think kind of to address Mr. Chairman, Representative Gray's question, hopefully I can kind of clarify that a bit. I think in answer to that question, is the 11 days the issue? To me, I don't think that's the issue. I think the heart of the bill, like you know, Speaker Barlow had mentioned, is the ability to transport an individual from one project to another. And I think I can give you a fairly, you know, simple example that kind of helps hit it home. But, you know, oftentimes, the vast majority of time anyway, often we see, you know, specialty trades, I'll call them, that a contractor may need to hire for a public works project. And one of those, a great example is an elevator repair person or an elevator installer. I think we have one of those in the state of Wyoming. Generally, those trades come from out of state. And so if, you know, a contractor's doing a job, let's say at the new Casper State Office Building, they have permission to take that elevator repairman to the Casper State Building project. But they're also doing a public works project up in Cody that just so happens they need an elevator installed. Right now, the law doesn't allow them to transport that person from the Casper building project to the Cody project without first going through this process of certification at one of our workforce centers. And so this bill just really kind of tightens that up a little bit, makes it really easier on our staff as well as the contractors that they can certify the person to transport and not certify the project. So hopefully that helps clear anything up. And I would ask Mr. Mansfield to chime in if I missed anything or if there's other questions. Thank you.
Go ahead when you're ready, Mr. Mansfield.
Great, thank you. My name is Trevor Mansfield. I'm the business manager that manages the compliance unit that looks into the Preference Act. I think Mr. Wolf nailed it on the head, and I don't have anything additional to add, but I'm certainly here to help answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you. Representative Gray has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Wolf, I mean, do you think it's possible we could just add a line saying that someone that's been certified could be transferred instead of like totally changing, creating this 9-month window? It kind of changes the whole notification. I mean, to me, I think we can retain the 11 days and retain the original language and really just add a line about this transferring issue. I mean, do you think that's possible? Is it possible to construct an amendment to make this, retain the original language, but really just add in a sentence that clarifies this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Representative Gray, I would defer probably to the contractors in the room as to if that would work for them. I think throughout the years of my tenure, and I think Trevor's here, a lot of our discussion with the contractor community has been the inability to transport a specialty trade from one public works project to another. So that very well may work for them, but I would be interested to hear their take on that.
All right, thank you. We will move to back into the room. Anyone else want to step up and testify? We're done with agencies. Don't come rushing. Good morning. Whoever wants to begin.
Good morning, Madam Co-Chairman. I'm Katie Legursky with the Associated General Contractors, and I did bring the experts with me this morning. Just to give you guys a little idea, the AGC of Wyoming is comprised of mainly heavy highway contractors who are the ones that build our road, bridges, highways, do all utilities works, but we also do have a number of members that do the vertical construction as well. Our membership travels on a regular basis. Obviously, there isn't enough work in one community, so they travel throughout the state of Wyoming. So labor preference is very, very important to them. I'll just give you one example. One of the hardest positions to fill, at least on the highway side of things, is a flagger. Those are the individuals that you see out in the communities holding the flags. We have two companies in the state of Wyoming that probably perform a majority of the traffic control on behalf of the highway contractors. One of them is located in Casper. They train and certify over 250 employees per construction season. The second other traffic control company is located in the Basin area, and they train close to 450 to 500 employees in flagging per construction season. So it's not as simple as it is of just trying to find employees. We're just very grateful sometimes if a flagger actually comes to work the next day, because it is very tough on the individuals to perform that. With me today is Jason Tysted with SNS Builders. They specialize in bridges and commercial buildings. I have Ken McKillop with DRM. They do utility site work and additional work throughout the state of Wyoming. And Steve Lofton with 71 Construction and their asphalt, concrete, utilities, among other things that they perform. And also in the back of the room, we have Lauren Benford. She's with Ryman Corp, a local contractor here that does both highways and vertical construction as well. So I will go ahead and turn it over to the experts. And I will say the number one priority in this bill is the ability for the contractors that once they hire a non-resident, they can move that non-resident labor to a different project. Oftentimes, depending upon the type of project that they're working on or the type of skill, they may be on a project for 2 days. They may be on a project for 6 months. They may be on a project for a month, but it's very important not only for safety concerns, but it's important for them to be able to take their crews and move them from job to job without having to go back and recertify or lay off an employee and hire another employee. And our number one priority, obviously, is to hire Wyoming workers because they understand the lay of the land in Wyoming and they love Wyoming. And when you expect your employees to be gone for 9 months out of the year, that they're not living at home because the construction job site is hours away from them, they appreciate Wyoming a little more with the outdoor activities. But I will just turn it over and we can start with Jason Tysted, unless any of you guys have any questions for me, Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Please, please go ahead and introduce yourself
my name is
so
Jason
that everybody
Tysted.
knows who you are.
Thank you. My name is Jason Tysted with SNS Builders. As Katie said, the ability to certify non-resident labor for a season is the most important aspect of this bill. it allows us the flexibility and the efficiency to move labor around without having to stop and certify labor for each project. And that shortens the durations of projects. That helps, that's in the best interest of the taxpayers, right? The second aspect is the safety. And when you start, when you have crews, they're cohesive. They're used to working around each other. And when you start pulling different crew members in and out, you disrupt that. And it can create some safety issues when you start moving people around like that. So for those reasons, you know, we think that's the most important part of this. So thank you.
My name's Steve Lofton. I'm president of 71 Construction. We're in Casper, Riverton, and Rollins. And I'd like to talk about the bill is something where we're trying to fix the exceptions. What we usually do is we hire a Wyoming laborer and they go to work. Construction industry is notorious for being short-term, fast moving. When you need someone on a job, you haven't planned for it. It has become an emergency because someone's sick, someone's gone, someone's hungover, whatever's happened to them, is that you've got to get somebody down there to a place in Wyoming that's not very close to another town. The worst problems we have are the exceptions. So we're talking about exceptions when you can't find the enough of your Wyoming residents, of our Wyoming residents, then we're dependent on out-of-state residents and people that just moved here. People, a lot of the flaggers and so forth, their college kids want to get only work for a little while. So these people don't have the, when it comes to the audit, after the year's over with, and the guys from Cheyenne come to visit you, you don't have the backup that shows that this student or say a prisoner from the penitentiary or a local jail was even here in the state during this time. A lot of these backup become almost impossible to obtain afterwards. So I think that you have to keep in mind that these are fluid situations that happen only in emergencies. So anyway, I'd like to pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Kenny McKillop with DRM. I'm based out of Gillette. I guess to touch on the emergency work that you had asked about previously, a good example of what would be deemed an emergency project. A lot of probably the majority of our communities have a sole source of water. They only have one water feed coming into town. And in my community, that's a big 36 or 42 inch RCP pipe or cement line pipe. A quarter hole, a hole the size of a quarter in that pipeline 7 to 10 years ago took out an entire city block in an hour, left a 12-foot crater in an hour. There's your emergency. This is the only source of water to town. It doesn't, we can't use it because we're taking out, we're taking out city blocks. And so at that point, I mean, are we really concerned on who's performing the work, or do we need the work done now so that we have our water source back? So that's a good example of an emergency project that would fall under this. The mudslides in the canyons, taking out the railroad, that kind of stuff, where, you know, key infrastructure is destroyed. We need it fixed. We need it fixed now. So I guess that's that's kind of, from our standpoint, that's kind of the emergency aspect of this bill. I guess the other aspect on it, not on the emergency, but the other part of this bill, like, it's kind of getting beat to death, and I apologize, but it is the ability to move people throughout the season. And so that's where the 9 months is important. The 11 days is not a big deal. We're used to it. We're good with that. But just being able to have the flexibility to move our crews wherever we need to move them. And sometimes we don't have 11 days between projects from notice that, hey, you need to get here and get this done, to when we're expected to be on the project. And so, by having the certificates certify the job and not the employee, that puts us in a bind where we're having to break up crews, and we actually have can and cannot crews is what we have. And so we have the can crews can work on any project, and the cannots, we have to pay attention to where they're going, which is just another aspect of logistics within our companies. And so this would it wouldn't do away with that, but it would help that. And then some of the other aspect behind the 9 months period, where we were in our discussions, how we settled on 9 months, is snowbirds are a good example. We have people that spend the summers, or they come up to Wyoming for the work season, and then they winter, they lay off, and they winter in Arizona. Well, under the current statutes, they don't qualify as a Wyoming resident, even though they raise their kids in Wyoming, their primary residence is in Wyoming. They spent 3 months out of Wyoming, and they lose their residency under the statute. So that's where the 9 months comes. That's a big part of where the 9 months came from. And I guess with that, I would stand for any questions.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate our guests being here to testify today. It obviously shows how important this is to their business. I appreciate their business. When I was going to engineering school, I worked as a flagger for the first summer, and for 4 years afterwards, worked my way up through the process to an inspector eventually. But I realize how hard it is to get people of that quantity and caliber in a short amount of time. So just to give me some perspective here, on a typical summer construction season, what percentage of your workforce are residents versus those that are non-residents? And I realize that you can't get enough residents and you have to employ from outside, but what kind of a percentage do you think is residents versus non-residents? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can only speak for my company, and within my company, we're probably 90% residents. I don't think the issue here is that we're trying to hire non-residents necessarily. I think our unemployment rate would speak to the fact that we are hiring every resident we can. What we're looking at is the anomalies. Where we do have a labor shortage, specifically a skilled labor shortage. It's a nationwide crisis right now. And so if I have the opportunity to pull somebody out of Colorado or Florida that is that skilled labor, that is that upper position, I want to use every avenue I can to bring them and get them to work. And so under today's model, I got to bring them up here and put them on a cannot crew and try and maintain them and keep them for a year before I can send them to do what I need to do. And like Katie said, our specialty, DRM specialty, is heavy civil. So we're building interstate, highway, water, sewer lines. A good example is like a finished blade operator. These guys are putting aggregate, that's 1 inch rock, within a tolerance of a half an inch over a 10-foot board from 7.5 feet in the air. It's highly skilled. And that skill set is leaving the industry. They're aging out. And so getting a hold of them is a necessity for us. And so this just makes it easier for me to bring them in and retain them.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. A question for the panel in aggregate. About how many people do you need during a normal construction season? And round numbers, you don't need to add up 1 and 2 people here, but during a construction season, about how many people, workers, do you actually use statewide, do you think?
Any of you?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
We go from about 70 employees in the winter to 110 in the summer. We don't have the problem that flaggers do, but we have a lot of churn, a lot of turnover. People treat construction as almost a temporary job.
So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would kind of echo that sentiment. Our company, we're about 80 to 100 employees in the winter. We go up to about 225 to 250 in the summer. And then our turnover rate's probably in the 30% that we would be turning over throughout that season.
I was waiting.
Madam Chair, we're pretty similar. We're around 100 employees in the winter and ramp up to over 200 in a season. We do a lot of bridge work, and that's a lot of jackhammer time. So our turnovers probably close to that 30 to 40% as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That's pretty much universal. We have companies, small companies to large companies. There's another contractor that does a lot of dirt work in Casper that can ramp up as much to 350 employees in the summer. So it really depends upon the specialty of the contractor, the amount of projects they have. And like I said, with the flagging, that's kind of a unique situation, but it's not uncommon for them to go through 400 flaggers in a construction season.
Follow-up.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think it's fair to say, based on what you've told me, and you do compete with other construction work, whether it's office buildings, private construction, turnarounds at the larger plants in the state, and that, is it fair to say that there just are not enough skilled workers in Wyoming to meet your demands? Yeah, I'll take the head nodding as a yes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
And follow up, just one last thing, Madam Chair.
Continue.
Thank you. Just to thank all of you for your commitment to the state, especially 71 Construction for your commitment to Rollins. Appreciate it. And that, so in your opinion, the bill is a definite help to you in getting a workforce that can do the job and do it effectively, efficiently. Okay, thank you.
Chairman.
Go ahead, any of you, jump in.
Yeah, thank you. That is our hope. Like I say, it's not everyday business that we're talking about with this bill. Everyday business, we are hiring local people and Wyoming employees. And when we're trying to pull people in, it's almost temporary. Or we're recruiting people. We're recruiting people to Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the room? Raise your hand if you want to testify. Come on up. Please state your name and who you represent.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tammy Johnson, and I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming State AFL-CIO. I appreciate the time today to talk with you about this bill. I have met with Ms. Legursky, and we talked with some of the contractors too, and in tandem to kind of work through some of the the issues with the bill and, you know, the importance of this bill, which, as you may know, Wyoming State AFL-CIO has over 6,000, 7,000 members in the state, and many of those are trades, labor workers. They are union members, but they do, many of them do some similar work as what you've been hearing about here today. If you don't mind, I'd just like to walk through the bill. I've made some notes about the different comments you've all made, and I'll just kind of address those as we go. Representative Heiner, I think you hit something on really important on the definition of a resident. To go from having lived here, been a resident for 1 year prior to application for employment, which is the current statute, to no sidebars on that, other than just pulling your camper into a campground and saying, I reside here, is problematic. I think we would see a lot more people in the state not working because it would be much easier to bring in non-resident workers. And remember, these are public works projects as well. So it's important to keep that in mind. We're not talking about private projects. We're just talking about public works projects, state money. So we've talked about perhaps an amendment to this that would make it a little easier. And I'll continue to work with the Contractors Association to try to come up with something that's a little more palatable. I get it. A year is tough. It's tough to get people. And so we've kind of talked about that, but walking back down through the bill, I did, and Speaker Barlow and I talked about the Wyoming school piece, and I think the intent there is college, but that does also include, it could include the way it's written, high school kids who are 18 who could be on these jobs. So I don't know if that needs any clarification. But as we walk through a little bit more, when we get to the heart of the bill where you guys had a lot of discussion, and that's on the emergency issue, the 12-month, and I wanted to ask Mr. Wolf as he was speaking, because he was talking about an elevator operator who's a resident who moves from one job to another. That's not what the issue is with this bill, because in line 8 on page, I've written all over it, on page 4, line 8 talks about a person required to employ Wyoming laborers may employ non-resident laborers if, and that's where all the emergency stuff kicks in. It doesn't kick in for that resident laborer who's working on the elevator in Casper and then needs to go to the elevator in Cody. Agreed that the 11 days, we'd like to see that left in. We think that's really important, that there's plenty of notice for workers to be able to get on the jobs. We don't have a lot of heartburn about the 9-month piece and the transference of workers from job to job. Safety is certainly one of the number one issues AFL-CIO works on. And as you may know or may not know, Wyoming is number 1 in the nation in workplace fatalities. So year after year. So anything we can do to make the workplace safer for our laborers is definitely important, and keeping people on the job is key to that. Agreed. But I think the complication comes when you certified it, and you're certifying non-resident laborers is what you're doing. So if there are laborers in the state in the middle of the summer who get laid off from a hotel, there's not as much tourism, something like that, they're precluded from getting work now because the non-residents have been allowed in the door and they have the work. So just to make you aware that that is maybe an unintended consequence, that there may be Wyoming summer workers who are loosened up, who need work, they won't be eligible to get that work because it will have been given to a non-resident. With the emergency issues, when I met with the tradesmen that I represent, they felt like that emergency piece was a little loose and would like to see that defined in rule and reg, what constitutes an emergency. I think right now we do have emergencies that happen in the state, and we must have provisions for handling those. A rock slide in Hoback Canyon, an avalanche somewhere, those must be taken care of, and I didn't hear, and I'm not sure how those are handled now. And then, so we would like to see the 11-day period kept, Representative Gray, as you spoke about. And then Representative Western, you were right on, oh, you're gone. You were right on with your comments about how the need for laborers can't be filled from workforce centers. So I think it's important that we remember that the workforce centers have the list, they have the list of workers, but it's also, I think what happens is, like any company that hires, you hire the people in your community who need work, and then you go to the workforce centers. And so you've hired residents already, and then to fill those holes, you go to the workforce centers. We would like to point out that there is another place where people get hired, and that's local hiring halls. And instead of going to Florida, as one of the gentlemen said earlier, to find a laborer to bring them up here, going to a local hiring hall would be another place where you can find Wyoming residents who are highly skilled, well-trained, been through apprenticeship programs, and know how to do the work. So those are options that are available too. And if I were to ask for an amendment on line 4 on page 5, I would say workforce services or local hiring halls. But I'm not going to push that too hard right now. So in general, we're okay with the bill. I wanted to just move to enforcement. One of the things that's left out when you drop the federal I'm sorry, it's okay. When you drop the on page 6 with the lines 19 through 21, if you drop the project form that's consistent with federally certified reporting requirements, we lose the wage reporting. So while the payroll report will include, as it's written here, residency status, job title, and the number of days each labor's on the job, we don't have the wage reporting, which is a critical component to that report. So either we'd like to see the federal piece left in there or add the wages reported so that we're certain workforce services doesn't have to chase that information down about how much the laborers were paid. So, I guess that's about it. I am concerned about changing that residency, keeping the residency at a year. I don't want to see that just go away completely so that the guy with the guy or gal with the trailer can just pull into the state and say, yeah, I work here, or I live here. And I was also kind of struck by the comment that if you go to Arizona for 3 months and you come back, you're not a resident. We know plenty of people who do that, mostly retired folks who go down and winter there and come back, and they're still Wyoming residents. So I'm not quite sure where that's coming from, if that's in rule and reg. But anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Johnson, you mentioned this local hiring hall. I'm not familiar with that. I wished I had been, because it's probably been some opportunities for me there for my businesses. But how do you see that being enforceable? I understand the way it is with workforce services. We have a list of people, we know who they are, they've requested work, but these local hiring halls, do we have a list of people? How could that ever be checked to ensure that a corporation had made that effort?
Sure.
Ms.
Thank
Johnson?
you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Bear. I do know that the local hiring halls and the unions in the state have representatives that are on the Department of Workforce Services committees. And so they're in close contact with each other. I think it would be a matter of structuring something through rule and reg that would make sure that they had their lists of workers submitted as well. And I will be frank with you. The problem that I know the contractors have told me and would tell me is that for workers to be hired out of a local hiring hall, the contractor has to be signatory with the local union. So that requires an agreement between the employer and the union to hire those workers. And so that's the rub. In Wyoming is not a union friendly state typically, so we don't see that happening a lot. My great challenge in my life now is to change that, to help promote the benefits of hiring union workers and keeping those forefront in the minds of the people who are constructing the statutes in the state. It's really, I think we have as many workers who are union in the state that are not even really well known about because they're kind of quiet in this state, but they're well trained, they're well paid. I mean, we could go on. I don't want to be here to pitch union versus non-union. I just want to say we have an entire workforce that's also available, that lives here, that spends their money in our communities, that send their kids to our schools, that are often overlooked because they're not included in any kind of hiring agreement. So
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a follow-up question. Is there anything that precludes these union members from going to workforce services and being a part of that group as far as their union agreements?
Ms. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Representative Bear, yes, they have to, the employer has to be a signatory with the union for them to work for. So I admit that's a complication, yeah. Thank you for the question.
Representative Burkhart. You're done? Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate your effort on this.
Okay, anyone else or, okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Lauren Benford with Ryman Corp. Just kind of wanted to clarify a couple of things that have been said. We are a contractor in Cheyenne. We do commercial and highway work all around the state of Wyoming. And we want to hire residents of Wyoming more than anything. Our other challenge is we also want to maintain our employees. So we spend a lot of money training our employees and certifying that they can be on our highways or in our schools, building projects. So like some of the panelists said before, it's not as easy as just finding someone local. You spend a lot of time and money getting them the training that they need to be to actually perform the work that they have to perform for us. So that's also our a big challenge we see. So once we find that local person, we spend a week or two actually having to train them. So it's nice to be able to do that in the beginning of the season and just run through the entire season with that employee. I did want to also address one challenge we have. We do a lot of concrete work, and skilled concrete foremen or concrete finishers do not exist in this state. So we have visa workers that come back every single year, and every time they go to a public work project, they have to be certified, and we've never hired local for this position. So they are not a resident. And anyone also wanted to address the comment about people who come from Arizona. Statute says that they have to be here 12 months. So if they're only working here 9 and leave for 3 or 4 during the winter, they're not a resident. So another couple things I wanted to touch on real quick. Laborers, I think that might not be the biggest challenge we have. We usually can hire a local labor. It's really our skilled employees. And unfortunately, if you're a skilled tradesman in anything, you have a job. So you aren't really looking when we go to Rollins, you're not looking for a new job unless that's your home city. But that usually doesn't happen. Usually skilled tradesmen they stay with the company that they're working for. And especially if they can travel, if they're willing to travel, we hold on to those people year round. So, and the other thing is to address unions, that's actually a company's decision whether they're an open shop or not. So if an employee is union, we don't hire union employees because we're an open shop. So that's also their choice, but something that the contractor has to decide as well. And then the last thing, I know a lot of people talked about the elevator contractors. There's a lot of specialty contractors that we don't have in our state. So we don't have an elevator company in this state. There's 2 that come up from Colorado. There's a lot of specialty people who finish concrete. We don't have them in this state. They have to come up from Colorado. So again, if you have 2 or 3 projects with this type of subcontractor, I think they would also like to just certify, hey, I'm here working. You have no competitors in this state that do this work. So if he's going to do 2 or 3 projects, we actually get a better price from them knowing that they can just move around. So again, we do want to hire local. We work really hard to do that every single year. It's just once we get started, it's nice to keep our season going and not get disturbed by having to find new people that don't exist in our state. So if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Benford, Mr. McKillop earlier said that he operates with a can and cannot list. Is this something similar in your company? Do you have something similar in your company that would kind of describe a germane issue to this particular bill?
We do.
Ms.
It's-
Benford?
Madam Chairman, we do, honestly, it's our concrete crew. We know that every single time we have to do concrete, we have to get them certified. And we do get applicants for this job, but they're not qualified to do the work. So we end up wasting 1 to 2 weeks just trying to get them there. And so, but we do have a can hire or a can work and cannot work crew as well.
Thank you very much. All right. Let's close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, moved by Western, seconded by Heiner, Representative Heiner. Okay. Committee, any discussion?
I'd just like to say that I'm in favor of the bill, and it doesn't seem to me that we can remove the 11 days and do the 90-day or a 9-month option. It's one or the other. And so I think the 9-month option is pretty clear that it works for these corporations. It makes it easier for them to operate in the state of Wyoming. So I am in favor of the bill as it stands.
Anyone else? Representative Heiner.
I would like to make an amendment on page 2 concerning residency, lines 5 through 7. I would like to put it back the way
Are
it
you
was.
making a motion?
I make a motion, yes.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we put the residency as 1 year back into the legislation. And I'll explain why is throughout many.
First, Representative Heiner, I need a second. Anyone? Okay, seconded by Representative Gray. Go ahead. Yes.
Just to be clear, what I'm seconding, it's to put back in the stricken language on lines 6 to 7. Thank you.
Yes.
And remove at the top, well.
Representative Heiner, go ahead.
In many parts of our state statutes, we define residency as 1 year. And this clouds that by taking that 1 year out. We've heard through testimony that there's many avenues throughout this Preference Act of 1971 that if you can't find the laborers in-house or in the state of Wyoming, you can go outside and get those resources. But this defines that residency as someone that lives here on a permanent basis, or at least for a year. And so I don't want to cloud that issue of who is a resident and who is not. Those residents who have been here for a year should be preferentially treated. And I wasn't here in 1971 when this act was formally made, but I think that was the intent, to give preference to those that are here in Wyoming. And if we cannot find those kind of skilled laborers, then we can go outside and find outside skilled and bring them in.
Okay. Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate we want to give preference to residents, but if I heard the good gentleman from Gillette say that statute kind of puts them in this bind of getting that person, whether they're from Colorado or wherever, trying to keep them in state so they fit that requirements, they can be on the can-do list or whatever it's called. Maybe we could have them come back and testify and comment on that. Can we do that? Yeah. Anyway, that's I certainly appreciate the amendment, but that's my concern with it, is that it kind of puts that roadblock back in place, especially if it's a skilled laborer that they have to recruit from out of state. So that's my concern with the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, Committee, I would speak against the amendment. We define it, we've argued this residency, what it means to be a resident over the years, and have never really landed on a specific definition. It's come up in elections even. Most of you weren't here when a member of this body was elected and there was a question about residency. And it's a very difficult subject. I believe there's some other statutes out there where it defines resident as one person, as a person claiming residence in Wyoming who has not or is not claiming residence in another state. Wyoming doesn't really allow dual residency. And that's one way that it's been defined. So I would speak against that amendment for that reason.
Representative Bear.
I too would be in opposition to the amendment, but I would be willing to move a new amendment. Can I do that right now? Okay. Anyway, I'm against the amendment because I think that we're, as the good speaker mentioned, we're bringing in rules into statute. And I think these are the rules that have been being worked in behind the scenes for some time. So we're just moving it into statute, making it clear. I do share your concern, and I think I've got an amendment that might fix that problem. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, sensing you guys are ready to vote, perhaps? Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. That was really loud. All those against, say no. I believe that amendment has failed. Sorry, Representative Heiner. Anyone else? Representative Bear.
I move that we amend the language and take the 1-year statement and add it into paragraphs A through E, with the exception of B. I think that we can add the 1 year to the driver's license, to the proof of residency from workforce services, you know, just the general rulemaking that they've used in the past, and the minor, as well as the documentary evidence. If we add the language where there's 1 year
Do we have a
requirement.
second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
I believe that if we add 1 year requirement to each of those, with the exception of B, where you might have a military person moving into the state that already has this Wyoming residency, I think we achieve what Representative Heiner was trying to achieve. We just do it specific to the evidence that's being presented for residency.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure I'm understanding the amendment. I mean, so you want them to hold these ID cards for 1 year?
No, just that they would have proof that they've had that. The driver's license would have been applied for and received and had for 1 year. Each of these other documents would have shown that they've been in the state for 1 year. It's very similar to what we do.
Oh,
It's very
okay.
similar to what we do with a hunting license. You know, you can't get a resident hunting license unless you can show residency for a period of time. I can't remember if it's 6 months or a year, but you have to show some evidence that you've been in the state as a resident for 1 year in this case.
Can I?
1 second, please. Correct me if I'm wrong, committee, but anytime you go to a job, you have to fill out an I-9. And your I-9 will give you the proof of your identification, which would state and of your residency. So it would give you all the driver's license and all of that information when you hire someone. So I'm not quite sure the applicability here. Go ahead, Representative Bear.
On an I-9, you know, that's federal identification. So for instance, you could use a passport, which wouldn't necessarily prove Wyoming residency. So we're trying to specify Wyoming residency here. So there are documents for an I-9 that may not specify Wyoming residency.
Real quick, Representative Sherwood, sorry, I'm not in the habit of looking up on the screen. Go ahead.
No worries, Madam Chairwoman. I just popped up, so that was perfect timing. So I apologize if this question or example muddies the water, because I do appreciate what Representative Bear is trying to do. But in thinking about the large population of students that we have in Albany County, I feel like this may make it more difficult for students who are looking for summer employment on a construction job. Are they residents? Are they not? You know, but they're claiming domicile in the dorms or here in Laramie.
Representative Gray. You're okay? All right. Anyone else? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative, I just need to have you help me understand exactly what your amendment does. Could you give me the wording, for instance, on paragraph A? How that amendment would appear in that paragraph?
Okay, let me work this through my mind at the same time. A current Wyoming driver's license or identification card under Title 31 of the Wyoming statutes or copy thereof, we would have to state for a period of 1 year. Having been valid for 1 year might be a better way of putting that.
Carol, did you get that?
What I understand is he would say having been valid for 1 year, I believe is the last thing that he said. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, that's correct.
I do have a question. He said everything except B, and I'm looking at E.
You want to go ahead and clarify, Representative Bear?
Yeah, the language may need to be different in E because we're just using documentary evidence, which I
D,
assume-
could you clarify which letter? Because this is E, D, or B. They're all sounding the same to me. Sorry.
I believe the good secretary mentioned E.
E is an elephant.
E is an echo.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm thinking, he said right now that he wants it in A, he said all of them, which would be A, C, D, and E, except for B. He did not want B. So it'd
B
be
as in
A,
boy?
C, D, and E.
That is correct.
Okay.
So, Madam Chairman, to answer the question about E, we're talking about, I believe, documents that would be like a power bill, things like that, where they would show residence for 1 year, and it wouldn't be necessarily a valid driver's license, official ID. And so that language would be substantiating residence for 1 year, something to that effect.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I guess my concern is very similar to the previous amendment that is proposed, because if we put that down, for example, on line 12 through 14, then have had it for 1 year, it kind of defeats the purpose of one of these contractors, especially if it's, I don't know, a skilled position of some sort. They find someone, some non-resident to come in, and they have to stick them again on this can't work cruise for a year. And it kind of creates that barrier that I think they were trying to overcome, if I heard the testimony correctly. So that's, I certainly appreciate it, but that's my concern with the amendments. I'll be a no vote. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Bear.
Just one more time on behalf of the amendment, what we're discussing here are the people that are going to be accepted from the statute. These are people that would be considered residents, so they're not at issue. They would already be on the CAN list. So once established by these definitions of residency, they're already on the CAN list. If they don't meet these requirements, then they're on the cannot list, and that's where the heart of the statute comes into effect, where we're providing them a 9-month period of certification where they can use them on the CAN list because they've been certified for the 9-month period. Thank you.
Okay, sensing everyone's ready to vote. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. Okay, amendment has failed. We're back on the bill. Oh,
Madam Chairman.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick statement. I know this is difficult for some people. I have some wording I think might work. However, I hesitate bringing it as an amendment. I would like to work with the good speaker, and I need an opinion from legal staff. And I will do that prior to this getting to the floor if it passes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So we'll just go from page 1 through 8. It's very quick. Actually, what I'm going to do instead, because we are 10 minutes out, we need to get back. Are there any other parts of this bill that anyone wants to amend at this point? Sensing none? Thank you. Question on the bill. Carol?
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart, Vice Chair I'm sorry, Representative Air,
Aye.
Representative Gray, Representative Piner,
No.
Representative Sherwood,
Aye.
Representative Western, Chairman Greer,
I think he's excused. He's presenting another bill. So,
excuse.
yes,
Thank you. And Vice Chair Duncan.
aye. Yes, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do not believe that Chairman Greer left a proxy.
I don't believe so either.
Okay, so he would be excused.
That would be 6 ayes, 2 noes, do pass.
Thank you. All right, due to the time, we will hold these other two until the next meeting, which is Friday morning. Congratulations, Speaker Barlow.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll work with the good chairman of transportation.
And so committee, we will resume the other two bills on Friday morning and meeting's adjourned.